The school auditorium was packed. Students and teachers were eagerly awaiting the arrival of Justin Bieber, who was making a special visit as part of a campaign to promote creative expression among youth. The event, called Voices That Inspire, aimed to give students a platform to share their stories and talents. Darius, a 17-year-old passionate about poetry, was among the participants. He had spent weeks preparing to recite a poem he wrote about resilience and dreams. But his confidence was shaken minutes before his performance when Mrs. Henderson, his literature teacher, moved and said in a harsh tone, "Do you really think anyone wants to hear that? Don't waste our time." Darius felt paralyzed, a lump in his throat. He considered giving up, but fate had other plans. Justin Bieber, present at the event, witnessed the scene from afar and decided to intervene. "Can I hear his poem?" Justin said with an encouraging smile. What happened next would change everything. Darius had always been passionate about words. Growing up in a neighborhood in Detroit, he used poetry as a way to escape reality and express his feelings. "Writing helps me breathe," he would tell his mother, who worked as a nurse to support the family. Despite his talent, Darius faced difficulties at school. He was one of the few black students in a predominantly white institution, where he often felt he had to prove his worth. Mrs. Henderson, in particular, seemed to have a special disdain for him, constantly downplaying his efforts. That day, the Voices That Inspire event felt like the perfect opportunity for Darius to finally show the world what he was capable of. He spent nights rehearsing, imagining the moment he would step onto the stage. But Mrs. Henderson's words before the presentation made him doubt himself. When Justin moved, Darius was about to leave the auditorium. "Hey," Justin called in his calm voice. "I heard you have something incredible to share. I want to hear it." Surprised, Darius hesitated before handing his notebook to Justin, who read the first lines in silence. "This is powerful," Justin said, returning the notebook. "You have to get up there and show this to everyone. They need to hear it." Darius looked at Justin, trying to understand why someone so famous would care. But at that moment, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time: confidence. When Darius stepped onto the stage, silence filled the auditorium. He held the notebook tightly as his eyes scanned the crowd. Justin was sitting in the front row, discreetly waving to encourage him. Darius's poem, titled "I Am Still Here," began with soft words but soon grew in intensity. He spoke about the struggles of being heard, the prejudices he faced, and his determination to keep fighting. Each line seemed to carry years of pain and hope. When he finished, the auditorium erupted in applause. Many students stood up, moved by the power of Darius's words. But as he stepped down from the stage, he saw Mrs. Henderson's expression. She looked clearly disturbed, but remained silent. After the presentation, Justin asked to speak with Darius again. They sat in a quiet corner of the auditorium, where Justin praised not only the poem, but also Darius's courage. "I don't know if I could have done what you did today when I was your age," Justin confessed. Darius explained how Mrs. Henderson had almost stopped him from performing. Justin looked visibly upset, but decided to remain calm. He knew that the best way to handle the situation was to give Darius the strength to continue standing out, regardless of the obstacles. However, the story was far from over. Mrs. Henderson, resentful of Darius's impact, did something no one expected. The day after the event, the impact of Darius's poem still resonated among the students. Many came up to congratulate him, saying his words had inspired them deeply. But while Darius felt a rare moment of pride, Mrs. Henderson seemed determined to undermine his success. During a literature class, she called Darius to the front, saying in a condescending tone, "Since you are now a great poet, why don't you give us a lesson on how to write?" The comment was met with nervous laughter from some students, but Darius remained silent, feeling the discomfort grow. Justin, who was still at the school for a Q&A session with students, heard about the incident from a student in the room. Worried, he decided to confront Mrs. Henderson directly. "Do you have any idea how your words can affect a young man like Darius?" he said, without raising his voice but firmly. The teacher tried to establish her position, saying she was just trying to keep Darius grounded so he wouldn't get lost in false hopes. Justin, surprised by her coldness, responded, "It's not your job to crush his dreams. It's to help him grow. If you can't do that, maybe you're in the wrong profession." The confrontation quickly escalated within the school. Some teachers and administrators began to support Justin, while others sided with Mrs. Henderson, claiming she was being unfairly attacked. However, most students stood by Darius, seeing him as a symbol of resilience against oppression. As the situation worsened, Justin gathered a group of students, including Darius, to discuss how to turn the moment into something positive. He suggested organizing a new event where students could share their stories and talents, creating an atmosphere of support and empathy. Darius, inspired by the idea, took the lead in organizing the event. However, while he worked to build something positive, Mrs. Henderson was planning an action that could jeopardize everything. As preparations for the new event were underway, Mrs. Henderson began spreading rumors among teachers and students, implying that Darius had only excelled because of Justin Bieber's presence. She said he was just a lucky kid who happened to be noticed at the right moment, slowly undermining the young man's confidence. Darius began to feel the impact of these rumors. Some classmates started to treat him with disdain, and he began to question whether his talent was truly valued or if everything depended on Justin's support. Noticing the change in Darius, Justin called him for a private conversation. He told Darius that people wanted him to believe he wasn't good enough, but he was. Justin explained that he had only amplified what was already there. These words brought tears to Darius's eyes as he admitted he was thinking about giving up on the event. At that moment, a student named Clara, who had been in Mrs. Henderson's class in previous years, decided to share something she had kept to herself for a long time. She told Justin and Darius that Mrs. Henderson had treated her the same way, always putting down black students as if they wanted too much. Encouraged by Justin, Clara decided to share her story at the new event, exposing the teacher's pattern of behavior. Her courage inspired other students to do the same. Justin ensured the event gained wide attention by inviting journalists and educational rights organizations. When Mrs. Henderson found out, she tried to cancel the event, but the administration, pressured by the growing media attention, refused to back down. The stage was set, but no one knew that the night would end with a revelation that would change everything. The auditorium was packed once again, but this time the atmosphere was different. Teachers, students, administrators, and even some parents gathered for the event titled Voices That Cannot Be Silenced, organized by Darius and supported by Justin Bieber. The stage, simply decorated, invited authentic and moving stories. Darius opened the event with a straightforward yet emotional speech. He stated that they were there to show that everyone had something to say, and that every voice deserved to be heard. He thanked Justin for empowering the movement, but emphasized that the event was not about him, but about collective courage. Clara was the first to share her story. With a trembling voice, she revealed how Mrs. Henderson made her feel inadequate, constantly undermining her ideas and efforts. She said that for years she thought the problem was her, but now she knew it wasn't. The audience responded with applause. Other students followed, sharing experiences of prejudice, insecurity, and overcoming challenges. Each story seemed to dismantle a piece of the invisible wall that kept many young people silent. Meanwhile, Mrs. Henderson, sitting at the back of the auditorium, appeared increasingly uncomfortable. Justin closed the first part of the event with a powerful speech. He shared that he had been where many of the attendees were, feeling like his ideas and voice didn't matter. He learned that the only way to overcome this was to keep speaking, even when it felt like no one was listening. When Darius took the stage to recite a new poem titled My Place at the Table, silence fell over the auditorium. The poem spoke about the struggle for belonging and the inclusion of narratives that seek to diminish the dreams of young people like him. But the most shocking moment came after the poem, when Darius's mother, visibly emotional, stood up and addressed the audience about the impact Mrs. Henderson had on her son's confidence. She said her son had come home feeling worthless, but now he was there proving otherwise. It was at that moment that Mrs. Henderson finally spoke up, asking to address the crowd. The room fell silent as she slowly walked to the stage. Her hesitant steps and the expression on her face made it clear she was conflicted. When she took the microphone, her voice was low, but filled with emotion. She began by saying that she was listening to these stories and realized she had failed as an educator and as a human being. She acknowledged that she couldn't undo what she had done, but could admit she was wrong, and hoped this would be the beginning of something better. Although her words were unexpected, their sincerity generated mixed reactions. Some students applauded, while others remained silent, still hurt by the wounds they carried. Darius, however, interjected, saying that acknowledging this was a start, but the real work began now. Mrs. Henderson, with tears in her eyes, specifically announced her decision to step away temporarily to participate in training programs on bias and empathy. She also promised to dedicate the rest of her career to helping young people feel valued, regardless of their background. The event ended on a note of hope. Justin, Darius, and Clara received a standing ovation, and the movement that had started at the school began to gain momentum. The impact was so significant that other institutions requested to replicate the event as part of a nationwide campaign spearheaded by Justin Bieber. In the following months, Darius's life changed completely. He received a publishing offer for his poems and started traveling across the country, sharing his story and inspiring other young people to find their voices. Meanwhile, Justin continued to support the movement, using his platform to promote real changes in education. During an interview, he reflected that he did nothing but amplify what was already here. The courage of Darius and these young people is what is truly changing the world. In the end, Darius realized that his voice not only mattered, it was necessary. And in every verse he wrote, he carried the proof that, with courage and support, any barrier can be overcome.